Hi, I'm Pam Fox at pamfox.org, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the gut microbiome. I am not an expert on this topic. I'm just going to be keeping it really simple, talking about some of the fundamentals, because this is a really important topic to understand when it comes to our gut health and when it comes to our health in general. And so in this video I'm going to be talking about some of the basics to help us understand the microbiota, the gut microbiome. I'm going to be sharing a couple of studies that were of interest to me and then giving some recommendations at the end of the video. So first of all, the microbiota just means the microbes that live in and on our bodies, and the gut microbiome are the microbes that live within our gut. And the functions of the gut microbiome are for digestion, obviously, for immunity, for brain health, and for many other things. We're discovering more and more all of the different functions of the gut microbiome. And typically speaking, you will find more and more that when people can clear up the conditions of their gut, whether they're minor or they're severe, they will start to see other healing in their body. So you've probably heard the adage that all healing begins in the gut. Hi, Martha. Okay, so I've got some notes here. I want to try to get through this. And again, I'm going to just try to keep it very simple and very fundamental. We'll start with diversity and imbalances. So when we think of the gut microbiome and the bacteria that live and reside within our gut, we need to have balance. We need to have balance. That is so important. And what they're finding more and more with the research is that it's the diversity of the bacteria within the gut is where we see healthier individuals, is where we see leaner individuals. While that's not always the case, there are patterns and correlations for this. And so it's that diversity. So many different strains of bacteria, and then you have that balance, that symbiosis. And I like to think of it as your gut microbiome as its own little ecosystem. So if you think of an ecosystem in the environment, there has to be balance, right? And when there's not balance, there's trouble. And one thing I like to think about, I'm reminded of, is when they reintroduced, about 20 years ago, they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone National Park. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. You can go online and look it up. It's really fascinating what has happened in the last 20 years. They had taken out the wolf species, and then they reintroduced the wolves in hopes that they could rebuild the ecosystem there because it was dying. So, and that's exactly what happened. They reintroduced the wolves, and the ecosystem began to repair and build and revitalize, because when the wolves were gone, the deer population exploded, and they came out into fields and valleys, and they grazed. And so plant life was compromised, and soil life was compromised, and I mean, you name it, animal life, plant life, the waters were affected, and the park was dying. So they simply reintroduced the wolves, and everything began to thrive again. And so it's that balance. It's that balance where one thing is out of whack and it throws everything out of whack, and there's like this domino effect. And the same can be said for the gut microbiome, where there needs to be a balance and a diversity of many different microbes, specifically bacteria. And so we know we have, what we consider good bacteria and bad bacteria, and they do different things, but they're all important. Just like in life, we think of things like slugs and mosquitoes, and we think, why do we have to have those? They're just a nuisance. But they do play a role within the bigger picture. And it's the same thing. E. coli, for example, is something that exists within all of us. Usually we think of E. coli, it's like scary, it's a scary thing, but it has and serves a purpose, and it just needs to be kept in check. And if you have the proper balance of good, healthy bacteria, that good, healthy bacteria keeps the more dangerous bacteria and pathogens in check. So it really comes down to balance, and I'm going to be talking more at the end of the video of ways that we can improve and adjust our gut microbiota to become more diverse and balanced. Okay, so undoubtedly there are many factors that affect the microbiome: genes, environmental exposure, and of course antibiotic use. And it's been said that using antibiotics, while they do save lives every day, obviously we know now that they're highly overprescribed and overused and can be extremely dangerous when they are overprescribed and overused for obvious reasons. But it's been said that taking antibiotics is like setting off a bomb in your gut, because not only are they there to kill the harmful bacteria, but they also kill the beneficial bacteria. And it can take a lot of time and effort to rebuild and recolonize those healthy bacteria. And effort here is the key, and knowledge. And if we don't understand this and we're not doing the things we need to do to rebuild those populations, then you're left with, again, an undiversified ecosystem where there's going to be trouble. Okay? So it starts at birth. So when we're born, a baby in the womb is considered sterile. There really is no gut microbiome at this point. But when the baby comes through the vaginal canal, it's exposed to all of the bacteria, and that is when those colonies first begin. And so we know now that with cesarean birth, we have, these kids growing up who have been born cesarean, and they suffer with more conditions like allergies, autoimmune disease, asthma, digestive conditions, constipation, and hyperactivity, just to name a few. And so the hypothesis is they weren't exposed to that healthy bacteria that you would otherwise in a vaginal birth, and so it just sets them up for failure health-wise. And so it doesn't mean that they can't rebuild those colonies, but again, there needs to be education, and we need to take those steps necessary to do that. Also at birth, we have, breastfeeding obviously is going to be very beneficial. And this is really interesting. I don't know if you guys know this, but breast milk, the human body cannot digest breast milk. It goes right into the baby, through the stomach, and into the digestive tract undigested. And it's not till it gets into that intestinal tract where the bacteria are, and the bacteria digest the milk. And that will help grow and promote healthy bacteria and immunity within the baby because of that beneficial mother's milk. Also, skin-to-skin contact when we're infants. Oftentimes when the baby is born, they'll put it right on the mother with that skin-to-skin contact, and there is tremendous beneficial bacteria for the baby and with that skin-to-skin contact in infancy. So that's promoted as well. And one of the things a lot of hospitals are doing, I don't know if you guys have heard of this, I think it's called micro-seeding or micro-birthing. In fact, there's a whole documentary called Micro-Birth, where they'll do a vaginal swab of the mother, and they'll actually rub that over the face of the newborn baby if the baby was born cesarean, in order to expose that baby to those beneficial bacteria. And this is a little bit controversial because it's new. I mean, we don't have long-term studies to show if there's any benefit to this, but a lot of hospitals are opting to do this, or at least giving the mother the option to do it in the situation of a cesarean birth. Okay, so what's next? So just a little bit more about infants. When we're born, we have, it's estimated, about 100 species of bacteria as the baby is developing throughout infancy, and that rises up to about 1,000 species of bacteria by the time we're age 3, and then into adulthood, and that can fluctuate throughout our lives at puberty and then at menopause. But about 1,000 different strains of bacteria is what we're shooting for. So again, we want a diverse, different variety of those strains of bacteria. And then also, you guys have probably heard this before, but it's estimated about 30 to 50 trillion cells exist within us of bacteria, which is equivalent to about 3 pounds of bacteria in our intestines alone. So, I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, they're even talking about the gut microbiome as though it is an organ in and of itself. And it should be, because it has so many different important functions within the body. And in fact, they're doing fecal transplants. You guys have probably heard of this, like an organ transplant, but a fecal transplant. So they'll take a fecal transplant from a healthy individual to a sick individual that's got maybe a really stubborn gastric condition such as Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease. what they're finding, they're getting good results from these fecal transplants, but they're finding the results to be temporary. So that's kind of where we're at right now with that. And in fact, they're even using fecal transplants from lean people to obese people to try to help with, for people who, you know, are morbidly obese, have tried everything and cannot lose weight. So the fecal transplant from a lean person to, and the reason they expect that this would work is because with healthy, good bacteria, one of the functions of that bacteria is producing short chain fatty acids, which are effective for, you know, metabolism and weight loss if needed. They're also effective in preventing cancer, specifically colon cancer, which is the third causing cancer killer in the world, colon cancer. So those short chain fatty acids are produced by the bacteria in the gut, and so it's important to have those beneficial bacteria that produce those short chain fatty acids for the prevention of cancer. So some of the other functions of these healthy beneficial bacteria, besides producing short chain fatty acids, are they produce enzymes. So enzyme production is a very important function within the body, because it's the enzymes that when we eat food, we chew it to break it down and digest it. It goes into the stomach where there's acid that will break it down and digest it, but then it goes into the intestinal tract. That's where there's a lot of enzymes that further break it down so that it can be absorbed by the body. And so we must have these enzymes, and it's the bacteria that produce these enzymes. These beneficial bacteria also produce vitamins such as vitamin K and B vitamins. So these vitamins don't just exist in the food that we eat. A lot of us think that all of our vitamins come from our nutrition, but our body produces some vitamins. These bacteria produce vitamins. Our body produces vitamin D when we're exposed to the sunlight. So it's important to have the healthy, strong, beneficial bacteria in order to do these important functions. Okay, I just want to check my notes and make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I missed a bunch of stuff, but that's okay. I'm trying to keep this simple. Okay, so bad bacteria. So when we talk about good bacteria, we've got to talk about bad bacteria. And again, they all serve a purpose, but there needs to be a variety and a balance. And so when the bad bacteria overcolonize and outnumber the good bacteria, things like putrefaction can occur, producing carcinogens and other toxins. And then with putrefaction, we have things like, we can have diarrhea, we can have constipation, we can have bloating, and we can have intestinal infections. So a lot of you can relate to that. Okay, so I wanted to share a couple of studies. So you guys can check these out at pubmed.gov. That's where all of the peer-reviewed literature is published on the internet in one place, pubmed.org. And this first study that kind of caught my attention was the gut microbiota composition correlates with diet and health in the elderly. So we talked about infants. This study was done, it's one of the largest studies done on the elderly. There were 178 subjects in a nursing home, and it wasn't a controlled study, so we're not comparing anything. They're just looking at stool samples probably of these elderly people just to look at their gut microbiome and see how it's doing in relation to their health. These people are obviously in poor health, and so what they found, if you want to look at this study, again, it's called the Gut Microbiota Composition Correlates with Diet and Health in the Elderly, and it's published in the Nature Publishing Group. But you can do a study, you can do a search in the search bar at pubmed.org, like gut microbiota on the elderly, and this will come up. Okay, so the microbiota of older people displays greater inter-individual variation than that of younger adults. So here they're talking about diversity. The individual microbiota of people in long-stay care was significantly less diverse than that of community dwellers. Loss of community-associated microbiota correlated with increased frailty. Collectively, the data support a relationship between diet, microbiota, and health status, and indicate a role for diet-driven microbiota alterations in varying rates of health decline upon aging. So, I mean, this just caught my attention because I worked for 15 years in an assisted living, and one of the things that always was a source of irritation for me was the food. And you know, they follow the menus that are given to them by the hired corporate dietitian. So you know, it's just one of those things where when you don't know any better, you don't do any better. And the diets they're talking about here in this nursing home is a high fat, low fiber diet. So you've got casseroles that are covered in cheese, you've got a lot of meat, you've got eggs every single day, a lot of butter, a lot of dairy, milk every single day, and very little fiber. Of course, the fiber is offered, it's always offered, but it's just considered kind of an afterthought, like it's a side dish of peas and carrots or whatever. And you know, a lot of these elderly, their appetites are very small, and they'll take a couple bites of their chicken and they'll be full, and the rest of it goes into the garbage. And I saw that every day. I would see all of these vegetables going into the garbage. You know, not everybody, but you see a lot of that. And so again, this is a high fat, low fiber diet. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so this next study, so the question then becomes, can we alter our gut microbiome? Can we create a more diverse microbiota within the gut so that we can heal the gut and potentially heal other diseases and feel good and be healthy and prevent disease? That becomes the question. So this next study is published also in, is that the right one? Yeah. Is also published in the Nature Publishing Group, and it's called Diet Rapidly and Reproducibly Alters the Human Gut Microbiome. And in this study, they took two groups. They took one group and fed them only animal foods. They took another group and fed them only plant foods. There was no sugar, there was no processed foods. It was strictly animal foods or plant foods. And the point of this test was to see if you could alter the profiles of the bacteria within the microbiota. And they found that the answer was yes, they could. In fact, it happened quite quickly. It happened within 24 hours of eating nothing but the animal foods or the plant foods. And so they had people in these groups. They had in the animal food groups, they had people that were vegetarian, for example, and ate very little animal foods. And now they were eating all plant foods, and then they had vice versa. And so they were able to see the change in before and after, the diversity of the profile of their gut microbiome. So, I mean, there's lots of slides here. You can take a look at the images yourself within the study and see the results. It's kind of cool the way they have it color coded, and you can see the difference between the before and afters of these profiles. So how then can we alter our gut microbiota? Well, there are a number of ways. Obviously, the first one is through your food. For some people, and this is where it's tricky because everyone is so different. The severity, you know, for some people with very severe gut disease compared to somebody with just, you know, maybe a little bit of bloating. For one person, they might just, you know, maybe cut back a little bit on meat, dairy, and eggs and add in a little bit of fruit, and they do great. They do great. They begin to notice improvements in their digestion and in their health. And then for other people, they can do everything right and still suffer with, you know, stomach cramps and diarrhea and constipation and these different symptoms from different gut conditions. So it's just different for everybody. But certainly, eating a diet that is low in fat and high in fiber is one thing to look into. Obviously, you know, things like probiotics, which in my opinion are quite controversial. There's really very little, they're kind of a new thing, so there's not a lot of science to support whether or not they're beneficial, especially long term. But it's certainly something that you can experiment with and see if you feel better. I certainly wouldn't recommend, you know, taking probiotics for the rest of your life, but it is one way to reintroduce bacteria if that's something that you're missing. The best way to reintroduce healthy bacteria, in my opinion, is through fermented foods. But then again, you know, like if you have a sensitivity to histamine, fermented foods might make you feel worse. So it's going to be different for everybody, and that is why my number one best recommendation for you, if you're really struggling with healing your gut, if you're really struggling with this, is to find a specialist who specializes in this, someone who who has been helping people heal their guts and helping them do it effectively because they know what they're doing, and they can look at you and they can do very specific tests to determine exactly what's going on in your gut, where it's happening in your gut, whether you have an infection, whether you have SIBO, whether you have, inflammation. And they can find out, they can test the different strains of bacteria and find out what deficiencies you have. So someone who really knows what they're doing can help you with this. Just your general practitioner probably cannot. They're just going to say, oh, you have this symptom, try this pill. The trouble is with that, it can be hard to find somebody, and sometimes your insurance doesn't cover it, or they're out of the state or even out of the country. But if you take some time, respect your health enough, take some time, do some looking, see if you can find somebody that can work with you on this. And sometimes it means working with somebody online. There are a lot of specialists that have resolved to that because they can help people around the world that way. And they can do testing, through the mail. They can send you a test and you can send back a stool sample and they can analyze it that way and kind of get you on a protocol to begin to heal your gut. And usually this is going to involve what we call the 4 R's, where we're going to remove, we're going to replace, we're going to recolonize, and we're going to repair. And those 4 things, I think I'm going to talk about those in my next video, the remove, replace, recolonate, and repair. Some of the different ways that people are doing this. I'm going to get a little bit more specific about those, but obviously they include, removing what's making you sick in the first place. So that's going to be, your common food allergens, things like gluten, things like soy, meat, dairy, and eggs, especially dairy. And then discovering if you have any food allergies, that kind of thing. You've got to get out of the diet which is harming the digestive tract in the first place. And then replacing is not talking about replacing bacteria, but it's talking about replacing those tools and resources the body needs in order to really start out digestion ideally. And so that means, are you producing enough acid in the stomach? Do you have enough enzymes? And so there's some different things you can do naturally to promote that. And then obviously recolonizing is where you're reintroducing that good healthy bacteria and recolonizing the good bacteria within the gut. And then the repair phase is a continuation of all of this, where you start to reintroduce maybe one food at a time, and then wait 4 days in between each one of those. So I mean, there's a lot that goes into this, but the thing is, if you're just kind of searching and reaching and grabbing and trying anything and everything, and you're not having success, that's why if you can work with somebody one-on-one, and I wish I could work with you, but I am not an expert in this. It's not my field. It's something I'm very interested in, and it's something I'm considering possibly pursuing in the future, but it would mean a lot more education, which means a lot more taking time away from what I'm doing now, and obviously it would be a big expense as well. So it's something I have to consider. But there are people out there that can help you. There are people that can help you. So I think that's it for today. I hope that helps some of you. If you want to try something today to try to get your health, to get your gut, moving in a better direction, one thing you can do is to try a plant-based diet. And if you think that's too extreme, you can certainly try cutting back on the meat, dairy, and eggs, certainly cutting back on the highly processed foods, including oils, and introducing in more plant food. Now, for some, this does the trick. For others, it doesn't. And for some people, it makes it even worse. Again, if you have a highly injured digestive tract, then you need to be doing, there's a lot of holistic care that may need to go into healing and repairing your gut. So, all right, everybody, I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.